So we have Amarilis Whitty on the left, who is the PR director at Mattel across EMEA, and Stephanie Lambert, who's the head of industry for FMCG Global Sales at Meta. And she also has a lovely painting behind her, which I saw last week. It's, maybe get onto that later. We thought we'd kick off maybe with you, Amarilis. Obviously, given your product range, being the company behind Barbie and Hot Wheels, the issue around sustainability and the circular economy is obviously something that's going to become more and more important. And given your product range, is there anything you can do to sort of give us a sort of brief précis on what your business is doing so far?
Sure. So I just want to check that you can hear me before I launch into this.
Yep, we're getting some smiles here.
Great. Okay, good stuff. And hello, everyone, virtually. Sorry I couldn't join you in person today. So Mattel, we cover, as you say, a range of consumer products on toys. You probably know us best for Barbie, but we also have Hot Wheels, Thomas and Friends, Scrabble, Matchbox, Masters of the Universe. So, we have a huge range of different products which are aimed at children and families. But really, for all different families and for generations. And what we're finding is that sustainability, and we're talking about circular economy today, but sustainability is a key issue for children and parents, and it's something that they're very aware of. They're really conscious of, particularly kids. Anyone who's got kids in the audience will know that this is something that is covered massively as part of the educational curriculum. I have two little ones at home who are always coming home with information and the latest updates in this area from an educational perspective. So for us at Mattel, we take that really seriously, and sustainability is a corporate priority, in which we announced our goals 2 years ago on a variety of different things. And so there's been efforts made on different brands and different product ranges, whether that's Fisher Price, a sugar cane type product, or Matchbox in creating electric cars. But I think the standout one that I would mention that was a key initiative from this year was on Barbie, which obviously is a sort of synonymous for plastic toys. So people may be wondering, well, how does that work from a sustainability point of view? But we were really pleased to announce the very first Barbie doll made of 90% recyclable ocean-bound plastic, which is a first from a technology point of view, and took over 2 years of technology development to get to that particular stage. So I guess I don't think we got a video, because I think we were going to share one. Less tech will tell me differently, but yes, that's been the big development from our side, and it's something that we're incredibly proud of.
Yeah, no, sounds good. I think everyone can, obviously toys play such an important part in children's lives, and I guess it's making sure that you can kind of join those up. Before we move on, I thought it'd be useful to kind of take a step back, really, and talk about what is the circular economy, and kind of maybe, I don't know, Stephanie, that whether you'd be comfortable kind of, just if there's some people in the audience who aren't quite sure what we're about to talk about, kind of give them a good kind of initial briefing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, to me, the circular economy is incredibly exciting, because I think it presents a whole world of opportunities for businesses moving ahead. But I think at its heart, it's moving away from what we're in right now, which is a linear economy. So that's where we're kind of extracting things from the earth. We're making products, they get used by consumers, and then ultimately they get thrown away. And that's a linear economy. And in a world where we have finite resources, it's just not viable for you along that path. And so this new economy, this circular economy, is really about kind of reducing, reusing, and recycling. So it's about extending the life of every product that we're making, and therefore extracting less from the earth, and making sure that we're throwing less away as well. In the UK in particular, 81% of the resources are actually linear right now. So only 19% are circular. And the belief in the circular economy is really that there's inherent economic value in that 81% that can still be extracted. And that's what I mean about the opportunity, because as businesses in a world where we're seeing slower growth, more volatile commodities pricing, cost cutting, all of these kinds of things, this affords us new opportunities, new revenue streams at lower costs, while also reducing our impact on the environment. So I think it's really, really exciting about redefining the growth that we're going to have in coming years.
That certainly sounds really positive there. I think, obviously in the kind of title of this session, we're sort of saying, why are consumers demanding to know about your product cycle? To sort of, I guess, take devil's advocate, how do you feel, Amarilis? Are people demanding to know? Do people want the recyclable Barbie, or is this something you're doing as part of sort of a corporate CSR initiative?
I'm really sorry, but the tech just cut out. So could you repeat the question, or perhaps Stephanie can answer that first one?
If I could repeat it just for a second, if I may. So I was just wondering, are consumers really demanding kind of change in this area, do you think? Or is it kind of, more about companies posturing?
It's a great question. And everything that we've seen from an insight point of view, we talk to hundreds of parents around the world. We talk to kids. This is definitely on their radar and on their agenda. This isn't, I think, certainly there could be positioning of companies, but does it matter to consumers? I think it definitely does, and there's lots of several different reports coming from that. And if we look at what's just happened with COP, I think there was a global sort of concentration on what was going to happen post on COP26 and the importance of what that means. So from our perspective, certainly it's something that is of interest. I don't know, Stephanie, perhaps you have a view as well.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I think do the vast majority of people think about like product life cycles or things like that? Probably not. I think that would be a small, 10-15% of people who would really be thinking deeply about that. But more and more people are conscious about that environmental impact. And in fact, our own research shows that 54% of shoppers say that they'll consider the environmental impact as they're thinking about the gifts and things that they're buying ahead of Christmas. So that's the majority of people are now, this is really entering their conscious. And I think it's kind of a push and pull, because also what we're seeing is that there's more transparency in the market. So no longer are these niche websites or niche stores where they wholly sell sustainable goods, and therefore you have a particular segment of people that are going to those mainstream retailers who are now being transparent about the environmental footprint of things. So take Walmart in the States, for instance, kind of giving clear ranges that are sustainable there, or Amazon with its climate-friendly pledge. So you have that. H&M has a range, and in the UK, the food and beverage industry is also piloting traffic lighting on environmental footprint. So you have also this transparency, and I think what's interesting about that is as more and more transparency becomes mainstream like this, it's going to be something that people consider to be an expectation. They're going to expect, as you're going shopping, that they're going to be able to see these things. So it's no longer going to be these niche kinds of shops. It's going to be everywhere. So again, it's that push and pull. I think a lot do care, but even those who maybe it's not in their consciousness, it will be, because they're going to have more signals coming at them and more ways to take, the right positive decisions in this space.
And so do you think that's the opportunity for businesses then, as kind of to get ahead of that kind of consumer trend almost?
I think it's back to this push-pull. I think that consumers is one area where businesses are being pushed, but it's also important to remember that businesses are being pushed by governments who have just signed up to their NDCs, so their commitments, their legally binding commitments according to the Paris Agreement. So they've signed up to big, far-reaching ambitions around net, getting to net zero, and they're going to need companies and businesses to play a role in that. So you're going to have pressures from governments. You're seeing lots of policies, take like single-use plastic, for instance, and bans coming in on that. So I think whether it's policies coming in, whether it's the consumers that are also pushing there, I think businesses are going to feel it from all different avenues in this space.
Yeah, I would agree. And just to build on that point, I think it's the opportunity for brands is to do it before it becomes regulation. So I think that's the real opportunity, to be able to take that leadership role, because it won't be a question of do you want to do it. It's a question of like if it becomes regulation and when it becomes regulation. It's taking that opportunity now, seeing it, projecting it forward, getting ready. This technology as well, it's needless to say, it's not cheap. Investment needs to be made on that side. So it's an opportunity and a responsibility, I'd say.
Any examples, sorry, about companies that are doing particularly well in this space? I know Amarilis at Mattel, you've got a platform where people can now kind of recycle their goods.
Yeah, that's right. So this year we were really happy to launch Mattel Playback, which is a circular economy scheme. So effectively that in the US, Canada, and 3 European markets, UK, Germany, and France. And this is very much the idea of once people are sort of done playing with their toys, if they're no longer good for charity shops, because, we do encourage them to go to charity shops or, to be handed over, they're of good quality. They're not single-use plastics. But if you're kind of done at that life cycle end, it's a really simple scheme. You effectively just print off a label at home to no cost and then send it back to us, and we do the rest from there. And the ambition really with the technology is to be able to break down the old product, use that material in pellet form that it becomes without getting too technical, and then recycle it, reuse it into new toys for the future. It's very new technology, but we are committed on developing it and ensuring that we can make that step. And I guess that to that point, we do see regulation potentially coming into other markets. So it's an honor for us and a responsibility for us to be able to get ahead of the curve and to be able to do that beforehand. And I think Stephanie also mentioned, I picked up on that H&M scheme that's also just come out as well, which looks really great. It's a kind of loop repair and recycle type concept, which is really mainstream. It's kind of similar to what we're doing at Mattel Playback. And again, I think we'll see a lot more of these types of circular economy programs.
How does that feed, Amarilis, into your kind of PR and I guess a sort of wider brand strategy? Is it becoming an important part of how you promote the brand and the business?
For sure. I mean, from a brand perspective, certainly, in the different brands that we've got that are consumer facing, like a Barbie or a Matchbox, it's definitely becoming part of the communication and brand positioning of these brands. And I think what will happen again soon is that consumers and audiences will expect it. So it's kind of getting ahead of that and positioning in that way.
You must, Stephanie, at Meta, come across lots of different FMCG businesses. Do you have any other examples of kind of, schemes that maybe the audience should be looking out and keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many across so many different industries to speak of. And that's what's great is that it isn't one single industry that's leading the way in this. You have just pockets of excellence, and even small companies, large companies, it doesn't matter. But yeah, there's a favorite example I have is Piñatex. So Piñatex, basically it's taking the waste it's taking agricultural waste. So it's taking pineapple leaves and turning them into vegan leather, which is more and more becoming into demand. So H&M are buying up this leather, but you also have the automobile industry, the airlines industry is looking into this, Hugo Boss, quite a few different brands are buying this. And what I love about that is that it links fruit manufacturers to clothing retailers. And I think that's an important point in this too, is just how sometimes you have to jump through wildly different ecosystems. And so the creativity that can spur from the circular economy is great too. So that's one of my favorites. Speaking of kind of the resale or the markets where kind of taking the products back at the end of life, because I love that example, Amarilis, that you have at Mattel that you've developed. A great one in the beauty industry I've seen is Maybelline. So Maybelline have also kind of developed a take-back scheme. So when you are done with all of your cosmetics, then they've created collection points throughout retail in the UK, France, and various markets. They've done this in partnership with TerraCycle, and they can take back all of those different empty makeup containers. And the great thing about that scheme is it's also just regardless of, it doesn't have to be Maybelline, it can be anyone in that category, but that way consumers know where they can take those back, and then they're sure to recycle, reuse as much as possible of all of those products. So again, great kind of in thinking about the end of life and owning that as a brand. And what's great about that as well is trying to own it even for the whole category as a next step in that, which I just find really inspiring.
Great. We will be taking some questions at the end if you want to do it through the platform or in person. So have a think. But before we get there, I suppose I feel like we can't get through a panel without mentioning the C word. Has COVID? How do you think COVID has impacted this? How other than this panel?
Apart from this panel casualty, I think it's renewed people's consciousness of the planet, the fragile ecosystem that we have overall, without wanting to get too deep. I couldn't quote you any specific studies. I'm sure there's plenty of them, but certainly I think there's a renewed consciousness sort of our interconnectivity. That's the way that we see it, and we see, long term as well, how, future audiences, future consumers are thinking about this or being affected.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I think people's consciousness and just kind of relationship with nature has changed. And one area that we've seen really through trends on Facebook Marketplace is just people's just thinking around the throwaway culture. So in particular, so we've got 1 billion people using Marketplace, and that's where people are coming together and buying and selling things that they have. And secondhand clothing has seen explosive growth. So in the States, we saw a 60% increase in interest for that secondhand clothing. Supply also increased, so it was a great way for people to just make some extra cash, which, again, from a COVID perspective, a lot of people were really stretched. So again, it's a win-win. In the UK, there's 500,000 environmentally friendly or upcycled items on Marketplace, and tons of categories, whether it's furniture or household items, gardening supplies. So there's to us, we've just seen such a tremendous amount of growth there, and just people realizing again that they can extend the life of. So rather than just going to the tip, to your local landfill site and putting it there, passing it on is a great way to do that. And often it's a win-win. You can make some extra money as well. So that's a key trend in COVID that we've been very aware of, and a really positive one for circularity.
I think you sort of both touched on it earlier, but how does, say, demographics come into this? Is this, do you think kind of younger kind of consumers, see this as more important than maybe kind of an older crowd, or is there regional differences? Or?
I think all the insights we've seen when we're talking to parents, and we do talk to parents around the world, whether it's the US, Latin America, or Europe, it's certainly something that is growing in consciousness. So even those older audiences, they are taking more and more consciousness. But what I would say is, is kids telling us in every conversation we're having them in different markets, it's not just, perhaps more evolved European markets like the Nordic type markets. It's actually everywhere. Kids are telling us that this is a priority. And I think what we need to keep remembering, if an 8-year-old is today, in 10 years, they are, the adult of tomorrow. So we're really conscious that they are the future consumers, the future parents. They are the children of today. But put it like this, I don't think we're going to see this slowing down. If anything, it's just going to grow in terms of its awareness. So that's something that all brands and companies should really be conscious of in whichever line you're in.
Yeah, I think I related to that as a mom more than anything. So I don't have a lot of research on kids or anything, but yeah, I do have to say, like, I've been blown away by just the education that schools are providing to our kids, and what that translates to in terms of kids coming home and challenging what we're doing and wanting to do more. I think we certainly see that studies show that younger audiences are more willing to pay for sustainable products, so they're willing to pay more. And also just research that we've done with various sustainable brands. So we have a sustainable business network, and that's kind of a load of sustainable native businesses. And in our work with them, we have seen that when they're kind of doing sustainable messaging, it seems to resonate with younger audiences really, really well. So that kind of backs up the point that I think younger generations are seeking this out. They're willing to pay that bit more as well.
Kind of potential pitfalls or challenges that kind of brands or marketers should maybe be aware of in this space?
I'm so sorry, that initial part of the question cut out.
Sort of challenges or kind of potential pitfalls in the space that people might need to kind of bear in mind, do you think? Is it kind of all
Yeah.
wins, or are there...
Well, I mean, certainly not. And I think it's the way we talk about it within, Mattel as a business is making progress, but it's not perfection. And I think if you have a very honest way about it, we're not trying to say we're greener than green or we're holier than holier. We're taking steps. I think that's what can happen to other businesses or brands. They think, oh, well, this could be, we could get called out for this, or there could be pitfalls here. Let's not do it. But I think actually that's erring too much on the side of caution. And actually, I think consumers respect if you are honest about your journey and how you are trying to get there. I think they'll accept it, and I think they'll appreciate the sort of honesty. But certainly, I mean, if there's pitfalls, if you go out there saying, we're zero carbon emission, we're greener than green, and you don't deliver on that public promise, then of course you're going to be held accountable. So I think there's honesty and humility in that journey in whichever business you take. I don't know, Stephanie, what you think.
100%. I think that is what resonates is none of this is easy. And so I think that, and I don't think anyone expects you to solved. So I think being very, very open and honest about where you are in your journey. It reminds me, I was with the British Beauty Council with a beauty event that we had the other week, and Anna Bartle, who works at Estee Lauder, she was introduced, and they introduced Estee Lauder as already hitting net zero, and she had to stop and kind of say, I just need to correct that, because we're at net zero for scope 1 and scope 2. We're net zero for operations. We have 94% more of our carbon emissions is in our scope 3, so we have a long road to go. And that to me was leadership and transparency. That's exactly what we all need to be doing, is just not taking credit for any more than where we've got to, being super open about that. And I think from a consumer perspective, making sure that you can create schemes that empower consumers, but always make sure that probably 90% of the ownership still should sit with the brand. Owning kind of what needs to happen for the environment, I think sits largely with businesses. That's what we know that consumers have said. 76% of consumers have said that to be the ones owning the solves. So I think where I've seen pitfalls as well is where maybe whether it was intentional or not, maybe we tried to put too much responsibility on consumers to kind of own the problem. So kind of just making sure that ratio is right. We can empower consumers. We can empower them to be part of the solution, but really kind of also demonstrating our own ownership and significant ownership of this problem.
Do you think the consumer appreciates that authenticity? Pardon me. Now, would they rather you be honest than say some, I guess, platitudes that are maybe going further than you've actually got to?
Certainly, I think that's the key. I mean, I think you'd be called out very quickly if that's the case, and that's probably a dangerous territory to be in. But I think that sort of honesty and leadership, as Stephanie just said there with a great example, is what's for taking. One thing I did want to add as well is that whilst I think there is a growing sort of consumer awareness that this is important, and perhaps there are additional costs. I think consumers mainly at this point still expect companies to take the cost on for this type of initiatives and products. So, for example, with the example I gave you of the Barbie doll from Ocean Bound Plastic, we worked really hard to keep it at exactly the same price that a normal Barbie doll or a sort of doll would cost you, and because we were very conscious to take on that cost rather than expect the consumer to take it, to Stephanie's previous point. So that's the other thing to know, and I think as we progress, perhaps that may change, but it's something worth considering for businesses as well when they cost it up, because this is not cheap and it's not easy to do.
In the past that might have been you sort of expect to pay more for, say, organic produce and things. It might have been presumed that you can kind of pass that on to consumers, I suppose.
Yes, and I think maybe there is still, a group of section of the population that would expect to pay for that. But as we move into more of a mass I think there's an expectation and companies will take on that responsibility or shoulder the majority of those costs.
What was the reception to the Barbie? Did it? Presumably, you can't give us your top secret sales figures.
I wouldn't be able to share like that, but it was incredibly well received, and mostly, particularly on social, a lot of the feedback, we can hear it and see it there on social. Consumers just really happy, and the feel good factor of knowing that they can buy a doll and feel good about it. There's a lot of guilt sometimes that's laid on with the sustainability conversation, about what you buy and what you do, and then you end up feeling guilty and awful, so there's a lovely feel good factor that parents were telling us. And there's lots of work that we're continuing to do, which I can't go into right now, but educational work that we'll be taking to schools next year around this particular product to generate awareness. So it's being well received in a short nutshell.
Interesting. Do we have any, just see if we've got any questions in the thing. Do we have any questions in the room? Put your hand up energetically. No, let's just double check, see if we've got one in here. Sorry, pardon me. Because I was, I guess in terms of obviously the recyclable Barbie's done well. Does that mean your next step is to go to the rest of the range, or?
So we're looking at that. We're looking at how we can continue to expand it, but also, that's the Barbie range, and then we have other products as well. So, for example, Uno cards, which are, that's a family classic. We're trying to ensure that the entire line is sustainable, nothing but plastic, so no wrapping, so to going through the entire, supply chain of different products. And seeing how we can develop that, but it's a long path and it's a long road, and we're very open about that as well. In how we do that. It's not a overnight type fix.
I think just building on
Sorry,
that, like there's
Stephanie.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to tell you all about my son's Uno cards. I was like, it's a bit more difficult to have balance across virtual and real, isn't it? We enjoyed them though. Yeah, he just got them in at the beginning of the last month.
We love that. Good Christmas present. Sorry, Stephanie.
No, that's all right. I was just going to say a build on. So there's all the things that you can do with kind of your products to make them sustainable. I think when we're thinking about circularity, I think there's also opportunities. For us at Meta, we're only just getting into hardware. However, we still think about circularity, and that was something that came through in our materiality assessment, was just that circularity is a key issue, and it's something that we absolutely need to employ. It's essential to achieving our own net zero targets. So other things to think about, like in terms of circularity, are which this is an area where we've really focused a lot, is waste, for instance. So that can be even your office waste, and thinking about that, and how do you reduce the amount of waste. And things. It's also just across your, all of your operations. Even when we're thinking about buildings now, we're working with a university to think about low carbon concrete. So you start thinking about what are all the different ways that you can employ design to extract less from the earth, really kind of make those products last longer and waste less as well. And so regardless of because if we think about it, the UK is an enormous service economy as well. So there might be people who kind of say, well, I run a service business, so this isn't terribly relevant to me. But circularity is actually a concept that's relevant to any business of any size, because there's loads of ways that you can think about circularity.
Point, I suppose. Do you have any kind of advice or thoughts on how you can incorporate this into, the sort of actual practicalities of, say, PR or media plans? How we can start. I know there's obviously lots of good work with calculators and things have been launched this year, but is that something that's becoming important in your space?
Talking about kind of the plans or production, so kind of the carbon footprint of marketing itself.
yes, that is what I was talking about. So I think there's been some work, obviously the kind of the ad producers associations are doing quite a bit of work in this area, and I know lots of the ad association has been working on kind of carbon calculators and things for media spend.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're proud supporters of Ad Net Zero, and Ad Net Zero has done a tremendous amount of work and impact in a little over a year since it launched. And so I think that things like the Action 3 and Ad Net Zero, which is around kind of the media carbon calculator, but also Action 2, which is around production. So we support Ad Green, we support the levy there, and what that does is it encourages all the production agencies that you use. So we as a brand have a ton of production agencies that we would work with. This encourages them to build, in a green way. There are, some great resources out there that you can find just even if you Google Ad Net Zero that are free resources for all of the ad industry to help to get to greener production, but also be more conscious of the carbon footprint of the different kinds of media plans that you're doing. There's also advice around even just how to get your own operations in better shape, things like switching to renewables or kind of thinking about, do you really, how many flights do you need? Those are kind of the two biggies, in the ad industry that are driving up our emissions there. But yeah, some great work, and certainly the whole industry is coming together to think this through and reduce our overall footprint, but also then think about what can advertising do for good. If you think about it, the advertising industry in the past has been used to drive really positive consumer behavior changes. I remember in my own childhood, getting kids to drink more milk, used to be something that was like a really big thing, and that was the advertising industry getting behind that. So I think the ad industry can get behind some really positive behavior changes that need to be made.
Does this come into your work at Mattel as well, Amarilis?
Yeah, definitely. I was just sort of nodding away with Stephanie, because that's what we've done as well on our platform. So we talked a lot about circular economy programs and products, but actually we're acutely aware we have one of the most powerful platforms in directly with kids on Barbie's YouTube platform. She's one of the top 5 sort of brands that are on YouTube. She does a weekly vlog, so you can find her on YouTube, where she talks to kids about different issues. We translate those in over 20 different languages. So she has we have developed content for different markets, and there she is imparting a lot of information, like think of it like a PSA around these different subjects of sustainability. The same we've done with Thomas and Friends. We've worked with the United Nations and their sustainability development goals to impart even to really youngsters. You can bring it down to a really sort of basic message for a preschool audience. So I think there's just a lot of different ways. Either their platforms, to be able to be part of this journey.
Great. Sorry, listen. I've got a clock down here, but it's saying I've got a bit more time than I thought. So I thought we were just going to be chatting for forever. But apparently we're going to have to move on to the next session. But that was really interesting. Just before we go, I think I'd sort of asked you if you had kind of like one tip for the audience of kind of one thing they could go home and do this week, maybe, to live a bit more sustainably. Do you have either of you have one?
Well, without wanting to be too preachy, I guess it's looking at your own sort of ecosystem. So whether that's your Christmas shopping, it could be tapping into that charity shopping. It's using paper, finding different ways to wrap presents. Look around the house as well. There's lots of different ways to be environmental. But I think also from a business perspective, don't think that you have to create a whole big grand scheme. Like, very small baby steps. Every business, every brand has an opportunity to be part of this process. So I would encourage everyone to just look at what they can do and be part of.
Great.
Those are great ones.
Stephanie, did you have anything
I think
share?
on a personal one, I'd probably say switch to renewables. We're really lucky that in the UK that's actually not too difficult to do. So switch to renewable energies and think about as consumers that every time that you take a decision that is a more sustainable decision when you're buying something, you're sending a signal to brands and businesses that they should do more of that. So just think about your buying power and your individual and collective buying power and the signals that you can send to brands, because the more that we do that, the more they're going to invest in this space.
Well, I don't think that's preachy at all. That's really helpful. Thank you so much. I feel like I've learned something. Cheers for your time, Amarilis and Stephanie. And look forward to seeing what comes next in this space. Thank you.
Thanks, Maisie.
Thanks so much, Maisie.
Thanks for hosting us. Bye.